Good morning. Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Inside India. I'm Sri Jegarajah. Here are your headlines. Stocks rise and the dollar gets a bounce after President Trump said he doesn't plan to fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell and said tariffs on China would be substantially lower with a trade deal. India is not immune from the IMF's lowered growth forecasts, but the South Asian economy is still expected to hold up relatively better than its global peers. And Tesla looks to India to bolster growth as it struggles in its key markets, but cracking that market comes with its own set of challenges. Right, the Indian markets join us in about 45 minutes' time. Let's take a look at GIFT Nifty futures and see what they are indicating for the early open. We're looking at 24,370. So that is about 200 points or so to the good. So really in line with the picture that we are seeing on the Asian markets, which is a relief rally and a rebound after President Trump dialed back some of his comments regarding Fed Chair Jerome Powell and says he doesn't plan to fire Chair Powell. Plus, there are hopes for China tariff relief, but no deal yet. So de-escalation really seems to be the narrative at the moment. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is managing expectations, characterising any future negotiations with China towards a trade deal as a slog and something of an uphill struggle. So make of that what you may. In the meantime, we are also seeing a rebound play out in the US dollar after President Trump dialed back those comments on Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Dollar index putting on about 0.2%, so getting closer once again to the century mark, and markets getting a bit of a sentiment lift after President Trump clarified that he has no intention of firing Jay Powell, despite criticising the Fed chair for being slow to cut interest rates.
None whatsoever. Never did. The press runs away with things. No, I have no intention of firing him. I would like to see him be a little more active in terms of his idea to lower interest rates. This is a perfect time to lower interest rates. If he doesn't, is it the end? No, it's not. But it would be good timing. It could have taken place earlier. But no, I have no intention to fire him.
Trump also softening his stance on China, saying a trade deal will happen and that tariffs will be substantially lower. Just hours after US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent conceded a trade war is simply not sustainable.
145% is very high, and it won't be that high. It's not going to be that high. It got up to that. We were talking about fentanyl, where, various elements built it up to 145. No, it won't be anywhere near that high.
In the meantime, tariff and trade uncertainty on top of the IMF's concerns when it comes to global growth. The IMF slashing its global growth forecast to 2.8% for 2025. That's the slowest pace of growth since the COVID-19 pandemic, and its second worst since 2009. The fund blaming the global trade war and saying it could worsen further.
We still see a very sharp slowdown in global growth. Now, I should point out immediately, this is not a global downturn. What we're saying is not on the scale that we had during COVID or the global financial crisis. It's a sharp slowdown, but it's not a downturn. The risk of a downturn have increased, and we estimate that there are around 30% now. That's up from around a little bit more than 15% back in October. So that's, those risks have doubled.
The National Monetary Fund also cut the India GDP growth forecast for the current fiscal year. The fund now sees India growing at a rate of 6.2%, a slight decline from the 6.5% growth projected at the beginning of the year. IMF citing higher levels of trade tensions and global uncertainty for the outlook downgrade. But it does see India as relatively more stable. Former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan was on Squawk Box Asia this morning, and he spoke about how India can take advantage of this tariff-induced shift in supply chains and where the country is lagging.
At this point, when people are looking for alternatives to make their supply chains more resilient, alternatives to China, maybe even alternatives to Vietnam, I think if India can rectify some of these problems, and it has done some of that in some of the forward-looking southern states. If it can make that clearer, hold investors' hands as they want to come into India, it could actually pay off in more manufacturing investment. But of course, the Indian success story so far is not so much manufacturing, but services.
India has been trying to attract investments from global companies like Tesla and pivoting to their earnings first. Tesla reported a 20% slide in its auto revenues and net profit fell as much as 71% in the first quarter. However, in the extended session, investors cheered Elon Musk's comments on Doge. The stock surged as Musk vowed to give more time to Tesla and cut back on working for Doge. This comes as Tesla's sales dropped in its key markets and the EV maker is flagging an uncertain environment due to tariffs. In the meantime, as sales falter, Tesla is scouting for other markets. Tesla CFO is saying they are working on getting into India, but it's also careful about entering the market, trying to figure out the right time and tax issues. Remember, the EV maker recently signed leases to open a showroom in the Indian cities of Mumbai and Delhi. Let's take a closer look on India's overall journey towards mobility and EVs and bring in Somesh Kumar, our partner and leader of power and utilities at EY India. Somesh, great to have you on the program. How confident are you that Tesla is going to plant the flag in India?
Good morning, Sri. Thanks for having me on your program. I think India is a very robust market and it is quite promising. Of course, it offers huge demand in terms of EV in the coming future, and it has also set, I wouldn't call it ambitious, but it's a reasonably aggressive plan of having about 30% electric vehicles penetration by 2030. So I think India offers a good market, and I think Tesla is one of the leading players globally. So I'm pretty confident that it would be able to enter the Indian market and take the right steps.
The CFO seems to be somewhat cautious, though, and there's a narrative about when is the right time for Tesla to enter. There's also something of an obstacle in terms of these outstanding taxation issues and how they apply to foreign investors. Do you think, Somesh, that Tesla and the Indian government and the regulatory framework can square those circles? And are we talking about a 1 or a 2 year time frame, or perhaps sooner?
Yeah, I think, the market is there. We've seen some of the leading Indian companies coming and venturing into the EV space, both or actually on all fronts, whether it is the EV fleet or it is the charging infrastructure or it is the ancillary services like batteries and EV components. But rightly said, there are certain issues, particularly with regard to over-reliance on exports, and also a few outstanding issues in terms of policy and tax framework. But I think the government is very, very well committed to making the EV story happen in India. So I have no doubts in my mind that the government will do everything to enable investments, including foreign investments in this space in the country sooner than later. So, I mean, it would be difficult to comment on a particular time frame, but I think things will happen pretty fast.
So much when you examine the progress that's been made so far, when you examine what the domestic EV car makers have been doing, and they haven't been sitting still, have they? They've been innovating, they've been bringing out new models. You examine the subsidy setup and the framework as it applies to the FAME program. Then is 30 at 30 Prime Minister Modi's signature EV policy achievable by that time frame?
I mean, I would say that it is definitely something which is ambitious, and we should have that ambition. I mean, we cannot set a goal which is not ambitious. So It is definitely ambitious, but I think it is very much achievable. India has laid a very, very strong foundation, for the EV ecosystem in the country. Uh, uh, while it appears to be bold and aggressive, but it's definitely realistic, I think. Uh, and we are already seeing strong momentum in the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler segments. I think they're mushrooming very, very well,
Yes.
Which really form the backbone of India's transport system. And these segments are leading the EV transition also, due to their lower operating costs and favorable unit economics, and now improved access to financing and charging solutions also.
I see.
Whereas the four-wheeler segment, I would say, and the commercial vehicle categories are slightly, behind what we would have expected.
They are.
Quite. Yeah, I mean, quite.
They are.
I
wanted to talk about that. Sorry to interrupt you so much. I wanted to talk about that because hybrids still have the lead over EVs, don't they? EV sales grew by 7% in the first 8 months of last year, compared with 20% for petrol and diesel hybrids. What needs to change? And does government need to rethink or perhaps restructure subsidy schemes like FAME?
I think, there are 2-3 things that I would like to highlight here. One, of course, is very high upfront costs for EVs. So, particularly in the four-wheeler and the commercial vehicle segment. So I think that really needs to come down. And that is essentially a factor of course, the subsidies which government is giving. I think, as you rightly said, the ambit of the subsidies and the quantum both can be enhanced. That's one. But I think the real game changer would be, how we can indigenize a lot of, battery cell manufacturing as well as EV components in India. So, those are still largely imported, and, that makes it for a huge cost. So I think that needs to come down. So it's high upfront cost. That's one. Another thing, as of now, I think, is in the EV segment itself. It's limited model availability, so we can have better choice, more innovation on that, and more models available, which has been happening in the IC vehicles, as we call them, but not so much in the EV segment. And the third and the last one, which I would like to point out, of course, is the charging infrastructure. Yes. So, we've seen charging infrastructure come up significantly in tier 1 cities. So they are leading. But, of course, there needs to be more there as well. But, the tier 2 and tier 3 cities where the demand really is for the country, there the charging infrastructure still is lagging behind. So I think both the center and the state governments need to incorporate in their policies various kinds of innovation so that the EV charging infrastructure can come up more.
Yes.
So I think these
and just to reiterate, that needs to be done on a national and a state level. And India's EV infrastructure is still in its infancy, isn't it, Somesh? Correct me if I'm wrong. 25,202 charging stations in a country of 1.4 billion people. And this is at a time when China is making great strides in terms of fast charging. How far away is India and innovation from fast charging in the EV ecosystem?
So as I said, the tier 1 cities, or the some of the largest cities of India, are obviously deploying much more charging infrastructure, whereas tier 2 and 3 cities are slightly behind. And in terms of fast charging infrastructure or innovation in charging infrastructure, I think that is happening. But again, it's limited to a few segments or few cities. So, the scale or the volume has not been seen, and we're not witnessing, that level of deployment, and consequently the cost also remains on the higher side. But, the technology has been enabled. I don't think there is a technological gap there. So I think innovation has also happened, or even if it is bringing technologies from outside the country, that has also happened. It just needs to scale up. I think it's an issue of bringing in more volumes, both in tier one cities and in other cities in the country, and that's where you will see lots of options being available. And I would say that while we are doing this, while we are bringing in all sorts of chargers in the country, I think we also need to look at, or the policy framework also needs to look at ways of making the charging infrastructure consistent across various locations, so that the range anxiety goes away.
Yes.
So any EV owner or the operator should be able to charge his EV at any place, and in the same amount of time possibly. So deployment of consistent charging infrastructure is also going to be very important. So I think that's one thing which our policy framework should enable going forward.
Somesh, amongst the commercial Indian EV makers, they're not sitting still, as I said. They have as many as 49 models on offer. Who's got the edge in terms of bringing out the most cost-effective solutions, the most cost-effective platforms, and really addressing this age-old issue of range anxiety in the Indian market?
I mean, there are lots of players who are coming in the market. The large segment players, of course, like Tata's, Mahindra's, MG Motor, Ola Electric. So there are all these players coming in. As you rightly said, there are large number of models available in this area. Similarly, for ancillary technologies, there are players like Reliance, Ola again, Rajesh Exports, which are coming up. So I think there are large domestic players, and some of the even the smaller players, more innovative players, which are coming into the segment, bringing in more innovation. But I would still say that for a large amount of components for EVs, both in terms of
when Ola electric scooters are catching fire, then there are some very real perception issues and reputational damage. How is that going down in the Indian market amongst the public?
Yeah, I think there were a few issues like that, and rightly, as you rightly said, it really brought about a big alarm in the industry. But I think all the players have taken cognizance of that, and I'm aware that they're doing best and putting in measures that so that incidents like those do not happen. And I'm pretty confident that all those things will be behind us very soon. I mean, when you venture into something like this, there are bound to be issues, coming up, in the interim phase. So it's just like that. I think those issues will be behind us very soon.
Somesh, some argue that EVs aren't really a sustainably green energy solution or green mobility solution when they are powered from electricity that is generated using fossil fuels, which is arguably still the case in India. You've done a lot of work around vehicle-to-grid technology in addressing that particular issue. Where is India in this transition and at this point in time? And is nuclear SMRs are they an option?
Okay, so I think very interesting points you have raised. I think 2-3 points there. So one is, of course, powering EVs, not with the traditional, fossil fuel-based energy. That's a very good point. Till now, largely all the charging infrastructure and the power that comes is based on thermal power. But there is a consistent move or goal to move towards renewables, solar or wind, whatever it may be, for powering EV infrastructure. And we ourselves are involved with a couple of initiatives like that and helping government and also some of the government-owned undertakings actually move towards renewable-based charging. So I think that's very high on government's agenda going forward. So that should happen. Of course, it takes time for embedding the renewable technology into the country.
Yes.
With EV infrastructure, so that's happening. But I think the move is there, and in the times to come, we will see much more greener and cleaner sourcing of power for EV infrastructure. I think the second thing which you mentioned was in terms of vehicle to grid. So I think there we are still in the pilot phase, I would say. So while V2G technology has the potential to turn EVs into distributed energy resources, as we would call it, I think it will still require significant regulatory and infrastructure development.
Right.
So I think that's in a nascent stage as of now, but
Yes.
we are conscious of it. And I think the third point which you said was around the SMRs. So I think SMRs again, particularly with the latest budget and focus on that area, we are seeing a lot of action by almost all the players, whether it's in private sector or public sector, to move towards SMRs. But it will take time. We are also looking at fast tracking that by using the existing power plants and repurposing them with SMRs. So we are looking at all ways and means of having SMRs come into the system as quickly as possible. But of course, that also requires the fuel tie-ups and those issues. So I think we will be able to resolve that, but I think that's going to take some time. So I don't personally see SMRs powering EV infrastructure very soon. I think renewables will happen first, but SMRs will happen over a period of time. I think still a few years away.
Great point, Somesh. Thank you very much indeed for joining me with the insights on India's transition to the EV path. Somesh Kumar there from EY India. Right, before we take our first break, let's get you a check on Bitcoin, which is on the move higher, actually, 92,857 and some change. Coming up on the programme, a surprise pause in tariff talks between the US and Thailand. We'll discuss what's behind that delay after the break. Welcome back. While countries race to negotiate trade deals with the United States, there's been a surprise pause in US-Thai talks. JP Ong joins us now with the details. How do you explain this?
Yeah, it's odd. Surprising is one of the best ways to describe this, Sri, because leading up to the meetings, actually, we were expecting, at least from the Thai side, that they were expressing that they were quite confident and fully prepared for the trade talks that were scheduled for today, April 23rd, in Washington, D.C. But we got word that apparently the Thai Commerce Minister and the Thai Finance Minister, who were supposed to lead talks, did not travel to Washington, D.C. because they've been asked to review, actually, the proposals, or the initial proposals for leading up to set the stage, at least, for these trade talks. Now, from certain reports, we've gathered that there are two areas that the U.S. wants Thai officials to review. At least there are two areas that they want them to review. One of them is looking into what they call some of these labeled certification of origin goods. Now, we do know that Thailand recently was one of 4 Southeast Asian countries that are now facing possible tariffs on solar panels that are said to be coming from China, assembled in Thailand, and being sold to the United States to avert some of the tariffs on these direct Chinese solar panels. So they want them to at least make sure that they can certify that a lot of these goods are actually being made mostly in Thailand and not being used by China as a backdoor to try at least get to the U.S. markets. The other thing they also want to watch out for is possible FX or currency manipulation, which the Thai finance minister has said is not happening in Thailand at the moment, but they want them to address these two particular sources. Now, it's important for Thailand because though China is their biggest trading partner at the moment, the U.S. arguably is their biggest single export destination, with about 18% of their exports actually heading to that area. Also important to note, Sri, that apparently when you look at the ranking of trading partners for Thailand, the 4th largest now happens to actually be India. And we do know that that earlier this month, we did hear from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who did visit Thailand and has expressed interest in at least widening the free trade agreement with Thailand and also ASEAN. So this could be one market that Thailand can actually pivot towards should the worst happen with regards to these trade talks with the U.S. They do have 90 days to actually conclude these trade talks, but we have to wait for the first round of trade talks with the U.S. to happen because they have been told to go back to the drawing board and they will resume at a later date to be determined.
It's almost like you've got a really good friend that you don't want to upset, 2 really good friends you don't want to upset, but if you upset one of those friends, then you've got another friend in the back pocket who will be your friend.
And this is the issue, Sri. A lot of these ASEAN countries are trying to keep relations good with both China and the U.S. and now India as well, but it's becoming more and more difficult now.
Absolutely. JP, and non-tariff barriers complicate those discussions too. Thank you very much indeed for that. Coming up on the programme, we'll be joined by former Indian ambassador to the United States, Arun Kumar Singh, after this short break as India reels from a deadly attack on tourists in Kashmir during US Vice President J.D. Vance's visit to the country. We are back in 2 minutes. Let's take a look at the Asian markets where a rebound is unfolding after President Trump said he doesn't plan to fire Chair Powell. There's also a sense in the markets that we are starting to see signs of de-escalation, signs of a possible deal even between the US and China, although Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been managing expectations, saying negotiations with China would be a slog. I wanted to highlight Taiwan's benchmark, the TAIEX. That's leading at the moment, up by almost 4%. We are counting down to the market open over in India. This is how we are shaping up in terms of expectations. We've got GIFT Nifty futures signalling an opening number in the region of 24,371. So that implies, considering where we left off yesterday, a move to the value of about 200 points or so. Let's give you the dollar-rupee exchange rate. We did see a rebound in the US dollar as well, following Trump's more conciliatory comments regarding Jay Powell, dollar-rupee at 85.2710. Now, it is a somber day in India. Horrific attack in India's Jammu and Kashmir state killed at least 26 people and injured 17, mostly tourists. This was one of the deadliest attacks seen in recent years. The region has seen decades of violence, but that's eased significantly in the last few years. The Islamic Resistance Front took responsibility for the attack. Prime Minister Narendra Modi posting on X that those behind the attack would be brought to justice. US President Trump and Vice President Vance and other world leaders also condemned the attack. The attack in Kashmir also came at a time when Prime Minister Modi was in Saudi Arabia's Jeddah for a two-day visit. Jeddah is seen as the gateway to Mecca and Medina. This was an Indian leader's first visit to the city in 4 decades, but the attack prompted Prime Minister Modi to cut his trip short and return to India. Prime Minister Modi did manage to meet Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman yesterday before leaving. The two sides are exploring joint projects in refineries and petrochemicals. India and Saudi Arabia signed 4 deals in defence and space, education, health and communications. Modi also said India would welcome Saudi investments into defence manufacturing that has recently opened up for private investments. In the meantime, US Vice President J.D. Vance is still in India. Speaking at an event in Jaipur, Vance sought closer ties with New Delhi and warned of very dark times for the world if India and the United States fail to work together. The Vice President also said US wants to sell more energy and defence equipment to India to build closer ties.
But India, we believe, can go a long way to enhance energy ties between our nations. And one suggestion I'd have is maybe consider dropping some of the non-tariff barriers for American access to the Indian market. Look, President Trump and I know that Prime Minister Modi is a tough negotiator. He drives a hard bargain. It's one of the reasons why we respect him.
Let's bring in Arun Kumar Singh now, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Sir, thank you very much indeed for joining me. First of all, your reaction to the Pahalgam attacks in Kashmir, and as you see it, what are the implications for security within Jammu and Kashmir, security on a national level, and India's relationship with Pakistan?
It's, of course, a terrible attack, very, very unfortunate, an attack on civilians by terrorists. This level of attack has happened after a very long gap, almost 4 or 5 years, because the situation in Jammu and Kashmir has been normalizing over time. And if you see yesterday, people in Jammu and Kashmir and various political leaders in Jammu and Kashmir also came out strongly condemning the attack and saying this kind of behavior is not acceptable. Indian leaders and global leaders, President Trump, the Chancellor of Germany, Prime Minister of Italy, UN Secretary General, they have all made statements condemning the attack. So that's where it is. I think we should have to wait for the Indian government to make an assessment of the situation, collect the information, and indicate what they feel was behind the attack or who was behind the attack. In the past, of course, there have been instances when elements based in Pakistan were involved in this, including with support from the official establishment. So this time, let's see what is the determination that comes out from the government. And if there is a determination that elements in Pakistan or elements in the official establishment are behind it, clearly the government will then have to figure out what kind of response it feels is merited given the situation. So in the interim, of course, the security situation measures have been enhanced in Delhi, where Vice President Vance is also visiting in Agra and Jaipur, in Jammu and Kashmir itself. But this is a normal reaction to any terrorist attack of this nature.
Ambassador, was it coincidence that these attacks happened during Vice President Vance's visit to India?
Perhaps it was not a coincidence, but maybe deliberately intended that way, because the Prime Minister of India, as you mentioned, was visiting Saudi Arabia, which is a growing and a very important relationship for both countries. Vice President Vance was in India. And in the past also, when there have been some major visits to India, including from US leaders, and one recalls the visit of the US President Bill Clinton to India in 2000. When during his visit there was a major terrorist attack. So this is an attempt to, gain some attention to, to whatever the terrorists say are their purposes, for which of course there is no justification. So one can't rule out that it was deliberately intended, but I think we should wait for more information.
And Ambassador, as we know, Prime Minister Modi has cut his trip to Saudi Arabia short and returned to India and has urgently convened a cabinet meeting. What is New Delhi's plan of action now going to look like, and how paramount is defence going to be on the agenda for the centre?
No, of course, I think, as you mentioned, the Cabinet Committee on Security will be convened. They make an assessment of the situation. And based on the assessment of the situation, they'll decide on the course of action that needs to be adopted. And of course, here the elements would be first to ensure that there's security within Jammu and Kashmir, to ensure that the terrorists and those who are behind them understand that this kind of behavior India will not find acceptable. So let's wait for the decisions to unfold as the Indian government makes its assessment.
And Ambassador, do you feel that other matters like the economy and finalising a trade deal with the United States may be deprioritised in the government's agenda, and is internal security at a state level and at a national level now of paramount importance instead?
No, I don't think it will be deprioritized. I mean, national security is certainly a matter of importance, but India has dealt with these kind of challenges before. And that doesn't mean that you focus only on that and don't pay attention to other areas that are of interest to you. So the government at one level will certainly deal with this, but other areas that are important for India's overall interest, political, technological, economic, trade and investment, those areas, the efforts will continue. And I think if you look at the US, for instance, during the visit to Vice President Vance, the US announced that the terms of reference for a bilateral multi-sectoral free trade agreement between India and the US have been finalized. And the negotiators of the two sides are very seriously involved in taking the discussions forwards and concretizing it. So that's one element. And then also the two governments have signaled that they are looking at deepening their technology partnership. In the Trump 2.0, they have announced a new framework called Trust, transforming the relationship utilizing strategic technologies. We're talking of deepening partnership in artificial intelligence, in quantum, cyber, 6G, semiconductors, biotech, defense, and space. And in defense, they're looking at unprecedented levels of technology transfer. The US had earlier authorized 80% technology transfer for the GE414 engine. And the US has said that this level of technology transfer they have not authorized so far to any of their other partners, including the NATO partners. So there is a signal from the US that they see India partnership in various dimensions, including technology, as a very important partnership for them as they try to maintain their global leadership in innovation. And also for India as it looks at working towards a developed India by 2047, which is 100 years since our independence. Again, the technology and economic partnership with the US is important for India.
Ambassador, to what extent do you believe Vice President Vance's visit to India helps facilitate a BTA, a bilateral trade agreement? And in terms of the timing, do you think a deal can be closed within the 90-day tariff pause period, or in the autumn at the latest?
So the Vice President visit, what it signals is continued high-level engagement between the two countries. If you recall, when the Indian Prime Minister had visited Washington in February this year, he was the fourth foreign leader to be invited by US President. There was the Prime Minister of Israel, King of Jordan, Prime Minister of Japan, and then the Prime Minister of India. The Indian Foreign Minister was one of the invitees to the inauguration of the US President. And the first multilateral meeting that the newly confirmed Secretary of State did was of the Quad Foreign Ministers. And the first bilateral meeting he had was with the Indian Foreign Minister. So it is part of that continued high-level engagement between the two countries that the Vice President has visited India. And the Vice President and Indian Prime Minister had also met in Paris on the margins of the Artificial Intelligence Summit that had taken place there in February. So I think the effort is through this engagement to signal both to officials in US, in India, to the wider public, that both leaders and governments value this relationship and want to take it forward. So it is in the framework of that the Vice President's office announced that the terms of reference of the bilateral trade agreement have been finalized. Negotiators are involved in intense discussions. The Indian Commerce Minister had gone to US. The Assistant USTR trade representative was in India. Now a senior official, Indian official, is going to be in US later this week. So I think the target they have set for themselves is with the fall of this year, the autumn, by when the US President is expected to visit India for the Quad Summit. So that's the timeline that has given.
So the timing could be serendipitous. Just on your point, Ambassador, about high-level engagement and the timing of a BTA and coinciding with, ultimately, President Trump's visit, Defense Secretary Hegseth may be the next ranking Trump administration official to visit India, and then President Trump himself is expected to visit later this year, coinciding with the Quad Security Alliance talks. Is all of this pointing towards India as the preferred and preeminent strategic US partner in the Asia-Pacific region, and really highlighting its role effectively as the China offset?
So I think US has many important partnerships in the region. US has a strong partnership with Japan, a strong partnership with Australia, strong partnership with South Korea. But India is among the important partnerships that the US is projecting for itself in the region, with which it wants to deepen the partnership even further. And I think there is a recognition in the US that it is facing a major technological challenge from China. And for the US to maintain its global lead in innovation, India will be an important partner for the United States. Today, for example, there are 1,800 what are described as global capability centers in India. These are doing cutting-edge R&D and technology development work and supporting the global operations of multinational companies, not just their India operations. So I think keeping that, for example, if you look at semiconductors, 20% of the global talent in semiconductor design is based in India. So there is a sense that the India partnership is useful for the US as it wants to maintain its global leadership in innovation. And again, India gains also from this partnership. So I think it is in that framework that both countries are looking at deepening their economic investment partnership. And US is the largest foreign investor in India. But interestingly, Indian companies have invested more than $40 billion in the US economy and have presence across all 50 states. So there's a very deep partnership. 40% of generics in the US are provided by Indian pharmaceutical companies.
And Ambassador, it's interesting and again, serendipitous for us and our coverage of US-India trade ties that Tesla CFO, Indian-American at that, Vaibhav Taneja, has said that their car maker is cautiously navigating an entry into India. When you talk to business leaders, and when you talk to investors, and when you talk to policymakers, do you feel that India is moving towards an era where a company like Tesla is ultimately going to plant the flag in the country?
So Tesla has been in conversation with the Indian government for a long, long time. And of late, there are indications that perhaps they are reactivating their plans. But it's not just Tesla. Even in the space segment, SpaceX, Starlink, they're all looking at India opportunities, technical partnerships with India. And if all goes well, according to indications, early next month, an Indian astronaut would be launched into space to go to the International Space Station as part of the partnership between NASA and ISRO, and it would be on a SpaceX vehicle. So there are many aspects to collaboration between entities that Elon Musk has been involved in, where they have strengths, and the opportunities that are there in India. And Elon Musk, as you saw, has recently spoken to the Indian Prime Minister, and he said he's looking forward to visiting India later this year. And he had also met the Indian Prime Minister when the Prime Minister was there in February.
But there's some missing links here to this puzzle, though, Ambassador. And J.D. Vance touched on this, the non-tariff barriers, ease of doing business. And then, of course, India is still a services economy, and it needs to make that leap into advanced manufacturing. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has talked about how startups need to really think about innovating as opposed to creating the conditions that make delivery boys and girls. That quality of jobs needs to take a step higher. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of the policy approach and the build-out of advanced manufacturing. India is not there yet.
No, you're absolutely right. India has strengths in the services sector, not the same level of strength in manufacturing. And I think that's why the Indian government has of late been making a very determined effort to activate advanced manufacturing and widen manufacturing in India, because you need to do that. Because, services generate value addition, they generate incomes, but they don't quite generate the same level of employment that manufacturing does. And India, needs to add almost 10 million jobs every year. So given that, the emphasis on manufacturing certainly has to be there. So with that, the effort is being made. And according to all reports coming out, a lot of progress has been made in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of easing of regulations. Of course, more needs to be done. People have spoken about some areas where there may be non-tariff barriers, but most countries have non-tariff barriers. People speak of heavy non-tariff barriers in China, large non-tariff barriers in ASEAN countries. US has its own set of non-tariff barriers. So these are issues that countries need to negotiate through any kind of trading arrangement that they work out between them. Both partners should feel that they stand to benefit from that. But my sense is that the Indian government is looking at all this very seriously, not just with the US, but also with the EU, with the UK and other partners.
Ambassador, I'm sure you'll agree, as a former diplomat, it's a sad reflection of the geopolitical state that we're in, that one of the biggest drivers of many economies is the military-industrial complex, and you've seen that in Europe with the rearm program. For India, how central is the build-out of a domestic defence manufacturing base, and how central is this to the Make in India policy?
I wouldn't say it is central. It is important. It's important because, as again, all documents in the public domain show, India is a very large importer of defence items. Now, India sees itself as a major power in the global context. And to be a major power, you cannot depend very largely on imported equipment. You must be able to build what you need for your own use. So I think that's one dimension. And again, if you see the conflict as it has been playing out in Europe today, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the message that comes across clearly is that there is a challenge if a country has to look at its own interests based on equipment brought from elsewhere. So I think it is in that perspective that the effort in India is that you need to build a certain level of your own capacity for defense equipment, and that's the effort. So it is not central to India's manufacturing or industrialization effort. Yeah. But certainly it's an important part, and India looks at its own sustainable national security in the coming years.
Ambassador, I'm very grateful for your time and your insights. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning. Arun Kumar Singh, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Thank you, sir. Right, Indian markets are up and running and up by 0.6% in line with what we are seeing unfold in the relief rally across the Asia-Pacific region. We will look at some of the movers in the Indian market after this short break. Welcome back. Let's take a glimpse at the Indian markets, which are well into the trading session and in line with the regional peers. The Nifty 50, the benchmark over in India, is putting on a very solid 0.8% and rising. We do see some weakness in the Indian rupee, however, given that rebound that we've been seeing in the US dollar after President Trump adopted a more conciliatory approach, perhaps, with Fed shares. So dollar rupee rate at 85.2820. Let's take a look at bond yields as well. And the benchmark 10-year Indian bond, the yield there down by about 0.4%. Central Bank is also releasing its April bulletin stating India is relatively less vulnerable to global headwinds and the volatility could be turning into an opportunity with policy support. Or the counter-narrative here, of course, is that India's growth trajectory and the outlook and the forecasts are being downgraded from the major investment banks to now the IMF. On to some of the movers in the Indian markets today. Let's take a closer look at HCL Tech, India's third largest IT services company, reporting a slight miss in at the top line, but it sees large opportunities from the tariff disruptions and expecting clients to increase their use in generative AI and other tech to reduce costs. However, tariffs are expected to weigh on its business segments once they fully kick in, especially, I'd imagine, in the North American markets. The company forecasts modest single-digit revenue growth in its current fiscal year. The stock, however, up by 6.5%. The broader Indian IT index also surging today in line with the feel-good factor and the mood in the Asia-Pacific markets. And the narrative of de-escalation, 3.2% higher for the Nifty IT sub-index. We're also watching shares of Tata Communications. Let's take a look at that stock in the session, putting on a relatively modest 0.4%. This is after it reported a 15% rise in fourth quarter profit yesterday. Tata Communications aims to accelerate its capital expenditures to over $300 million in fiscal year 2026. The Indian telco service provider's quarterly pre-tax profit rose to $39.5 million. Let's give you a look at Adani as well, which is halting its 5G plans and selling off spectrum to Airtel instead of building out its own network. The deal gives Airtel access to 400 megahertz across 6 key circles, including Mumbai and Gujarat. Adani has not explained why it is exiting, and financial terms were not disclosed, but Airtel is moving at full speed already with 120 million 5G users. Adani up by 0.4%. Bharti Airtel up by 0.4% as well. That's it for this edition of Inside India. Tomorrow we'll be focusing on the Indian consumer with Bain & Company, and also we'll do a deep dive into the markets with Vineet Arora of NAV Capital to check where Indians are currently investing. Don't miss those conversations. That's all we have for today on Inside India. Do stay with us in CNBC. Dan Murphy is up next with Access Middle East.